synth recording and signal flow, I think there's many different ways. I think the simplest way is having a good line level from your synthesizer and going directly into a good converter and into the computer, and you have full control. That is a technique that's often used in many cases. For me, I like to color the sound a little bit on the way in, and maybe some filtering, cutting out some low end, or in some cases even some compression, or in the very odd case, maybe even some EQ. For this particular instance, we're looking at the OB8, and we're going to look at the signal flow. What we've done here was straight into the Neve preamp, and from there into the Apogee converters, and good line level, always aiming between -10, -6 dB. That's sort of where my range tends to be. So if we have a listen to it live, coming into the desk, into the preamp. Okay, so on the 5052, just very simple on this. We've got the mic pre again, the mic gain, and then we have a high pass filter. And for this, all I really want is to be scooping out around 100 Hertz. So if I activate that and scroll that around, we can probably hear it now. And it's cleaner. And what I'm doing there is I'm avoiding any sort of digital clipping or the possibility of digital clipping, and getting a good respectable level at that point. And we go back over here and have a little look at it on the analyzer on the screen. You can see all this action between 10 Hertz right up to 100. And we don't need that with the bassline. So as I wheel this around, we can see that falling back. And that scrolls right up to 250 Hertz. But where I want that is a sweet spot, in and around 100. And that's giving me a good line level in for recording. And it's clean. It's got that Neve transistor on it. And just a very light coloration on it. Nothing crazy, nothing too much to even bring it away from its natural characteristics. You know, you want to keep it as pure as possible, and just a slight coloration on it. That's all it is, little coloring. There's many different techniques, many different instances for bass lines. Another one I use quite commonly is going into a universal audio, like the LA2A. It's the 610 tube here into a T4 optical compressor. That's the hardware version I would use sometimes. If I don't have that on my fingertips, we can have a look. And it's just the 1176 as well on the 6176. So between them two compressors, we have a look. There's the 1176 first. And it's almost like if you look at a bass line when you're moving around with the melody and you're changing notes, when you're going to a higher note, you're losing, I don't know, the emphasis. And a lot of the time you'll feel like, you know, the bottom's falling out of the track perhaps, or the bass has disappeared, or it's masked. And that is just amplitude down to a higher note being played. And a way around that is just driving the input. It's almost like a limiting effect. And I've heard of different producers actually using L2 limiters on bass lines just to compensate for them higher notes and that balance. And it is a technique. Sometimes I'll use that on the input going in as well. But here it is. We just solo this. We'll hear it on the bass line with and without. That's it, way subtle at the minute. Just after dropping that in, so we can just make some adjustments. We just want to pull that attack back, slow it down. Same with the release. And you can just follow the needle there. You can see where it's falling back and moving around as the notes get higher and lower in the progression. And what you're after is somewhat of almost trying to stabilize the needle somewhere. And what you're doing there is you're literally flattening it and you're compensating for that loss of energy on the higher notes. And it's only then I will ever chase that compressor with pump or sidechain compression. So it's flattened out, it's a nice shape despite the progressions in the notes. And it's only then I'll start look at modulating that bass line with a trigger from a kick drum. In this case, you see it, the glue compressor. And we just bring it even back where there's a kick drum running. You can see them needles really subtle, and let's just make that drastic. Just pull them back around it. Introducing almost a slight swing to it. And just working around the kick drum at that stage. So that's typically my sequence when it comes to a bass line. It can be used, this sort of an effect, before it goes into the converters. You know, with a plug-in, you have more control over it at the later stage. So it's really down to you what stage you want it at, how much control you want. If you have the hardware at hand, if you don't, you can use the universal audio, the mixer console, and you can hit it with this sort of a plug-in before it actually records inside your DAW. Alternatively to that, other options for preamps on the likes of vocals, you know, it's a similar sort of thing. A lot of people go into 1176 and then LA2A, you know, just to catch everything with this, and then just some leveling with the LA2A. So it's all very subtle stuff. Subtracting low end, I would say, is one of the key things to look at when you're working with recording synths. Be it even high-end leads or bass lines, mid-range stuff, you know, certain drum sounds as well. If you're working with analog gear, keep an eye on the spectrum. Keep an eye on what's triggering potentially digital clipping or anything like that on your inputs, your converters. You need to keep an eye on that sort of thing, because any sort of hardware synth like that can get wildly out of control audibly very quickly. And the last thing you want to be doing is blowing preamps, blowing speakers. So keeping an eye on all your gain pots with recording in mind, I think will bring you to a place, you know, where you have a good signal flow consistently set up, a formula that's almost in place. And you'll have different techniques, different software, different hardware, depending on what's at your fingertips. But realistically, you can get very similar results with each in their own if you work them in such a way. So that's signal flow with analog synths.